enforcement people that have been talking for the last several years about the harms that are being caused in our society and to policing by the attempted prohibition of substances. And we support them in their efforts, and what this is the Freedom Tour. It's the 4th year that I've run the Freedom Tour. Starting in 2006, I did 3 years in a row where I went from Victoria to Ottawa for Remembrance Day and handed out pamphlets much like that, talking about the harms being done by prohibition and what freedom is, which is the right to do or not do whatever you want to do or don't want to do unless you're harming somebody else, and the role of government, which is to protect individuals' rights to be who they want to be and do what they want to do unless they're harming others. But the difference this year is that my handout has within it, the next page when you turn it, is a letter written by 8 current sitting mayors in British Columbia that are calling for an end to prohibition and a regulatory system. You see, substances that cause problems in our society, the government has a role to play with those in the form of regulations, and that means a whole bunch of different things. The regulations need to be the least intrusive possible to start with, but some substances are really dangerous. You can overdose fast on them, they have addictive qualities, they can screw up your brain and how you think. And with those, there's a myriad of different things you can do. Age restrictions, advertising restrictions, quantity of dose.
You're suggesting, though, that the dangerous addictive drugs, we should have the freedom and they should be legal? Or because you haven't used the word marijuana yet, and I just picked up on one page here.
Well, cannabis is the one that's just, it's sort of separate from the harder ones because there's really not a lot of harm to society being caused by cannabis. It's not really addictive and it's not causing health problems for people. But there are those substances that are for sure, and there's a number of people that I'm not pro-drug use or abuse, that's for sure, but I do understand the logistics of it. That when you prohibit a substance, it increases the demand, especially amongst the young people and the rebellious people. It exacerbates the problems.
The forbidden fruit aspect.
Exactly. And it exacerbates the problems to do with drug abuse because it's all underground. And in fact, some people, you know what kids are like, little kids, when they don't feel like they're free enough, they'll soil their pants right in front of their parents with a smile on their face to say,
I never would have done that.
No, I didn't either, but
but those other kids,
pediatricians will tell you that's a common thing amongst kids because that's something they have control over, and they can say, yeah, you can't stop me from doing that, can you? And teenagers, we all know about them, what they're like. They seek out and destroy boundaries, and adults, I think, are even worse. That many times, if they feel like they're being oppressed, that they'll act out in ways that are very self-destructive as well to say, see, I can do what I want to myself. So, and it just does. The prohibition does exacerbate the drug abuse issues, which they are designed to help prevent. It does not decrease the amount of people using or abusing drugs. It has the opposite effect. And of course, with these substances that have these potentials, you can put regulations on them in all different forms, from taxes and a whole bunch of others. But whenever those regulations get to that point where the black market's going to take over, they have to be scaled back slightly, just to prevent the black market, because the black market has no regulations whatsoever. They'll sell it to anybody of any age with no ID, and who knows what you're buying. And if you don't get a good deal, well, you got to have a bigger gang than that guy's got to be able to deal with it. You know what I mean? It's just got a whole bunch of problems that come with it. And of course, there's shootings to solve these things, and every time a gangster gets shot, that's at least $1 million in a police investigation for us. And the real thing for me is, well, there's two of them. One is the amount of jobs that are available to our young people to sell drugs these days. It's just insane. It's lots of money, right? It's easy money. You're cool. The drug dealers, young people think, are cooler than the police, and that's the other one that gets me so bad. Is that the police get so much disrespect in our community, and their lives are at risk with all these organized criminal groups and a public that doesn't respect them the way that they should. So, these are the issues. I don't have all the answers. I know what the issues are. I know what the current policies are doing and how they don't work. So that's what we're on, and that's the nature of the tour. It's not so much me. In fact, it's not me at all. It's the 8 current mayors that have gotten together, the ones that feel they had some expertise on the issue, that have written their letter.
Well, their letter, though, I believe, and I haven't read the letter, but I read the media, and I was phoned and asked if I would be signatory to that.
Right.
But at that time, everything you say, I understand what you're saying. It was focused specifically on marijuana.
No, it's not. It does talk about the other substances and how we need a regulated system for those as well. And especially with the attorney generals. They said the case against prohibition is now airtight. And those are really interesting words for a group of justice professionals.
Well, and of course, when all the time they were on the bench, they weren't allowed to talk. I just was at a lunch with a judge today, and I tested her with that question. And of course, I could tell by her reaction that she supported what you're talking about. But I also assumed that had to do with cannabis and not sort of cocaine.
Well, cannabis is the easy one. The other ones are much more difficult to wrap your brain around, and me too. Well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want them for sale willy-nilly anywhere, you know, I mean, they would have to be strictly controlled. But there again, you see, those controls can be as strict as they get until a black market takes over. And then adults are going to do what adults are going to do, and adults are going to do it worse if they're told they can't do it. Yeah. That's the problem, you know. Well, and there's another problem too, sir, and that is that these prohibitions and these policies were never really designed to help people with problem substances. They were designed to protect the interests of those that want to provide other substances.
What I did,
and that's the root of it.
When I was at a meeting when the Stop the Violence BC had a meeting in Kelowna, and I didn't really know what I was being invited to go to. Right. I didn't know whether it was just 8 or 10 people around, but there was the Chief Health Officer for British Columbia was there. The 2 or 3 guys who were the front people, if you like, for Stop the Violence.
Probably Donald McPherson would have been there. He was the drug policy coordinator for Vancouver City for a long time, and I think he's pretty prominent. I wasn't there.
I arrived about
They've got a lot of good members in that group.
David Bratzer was there too.
Oh, was he? Yeah. He's an active police officer, David.
So, oh yeah, David from Victoria. Yeah. Yes, he was there absolutely. Quite impressed actually. Yeah. And he actually, I guess, before he became a Victoria police officer, had already taken a public position on this. So he was actually. By becoming a policeman in Victoria, wasn't muzzled like you are if you're going in. You're saying, like, our job is enforcement. Yeah. You don't have an opinion.
I know. It's not very popular conversation amongst the law enforcement people.
So you get retired judges coming, on board.
And most of these people are retired as well. David's a member of that
so
group.
Because I didn't want to make a commitment, not knowing what the meeting was about when I got there, and there were a couple of other mayors that were there. Lake Country Mayor was there. I'm not sure whether Vernon was or not. He's a doctor, so he's got
the mayor in Vernon, Mr. Sawatsky.
No, that's Vernon.
Yeah, Vernon, that's what you said though, Vernon, I think.
Yeah, but Lake Country, I think.
Oh, Lake Country, yes. No, I didn't go to Lake Country, but I did
the Lake Country mayor.
Talk to the mayor from Armstrong, and
Armstrong,
they're signatory to that as well.
And
Vernon, I think
Lake Country Mayor James Baker, yeah. He was at that meeting, and the mayor Penticton, but I don't see him on here.
No, he's not on that list.
Anyway,
Gregor Robertson.
So I was phoned to see if I would be a signatory. I said, I think I could serve another purpose. In the first place, which I think you would support and agree with. I said, in the first place, it's a federal issue, but we got to take one step at a time. Local government, provincial government. Because we get a lot of local politicians at our annual convention uniting and getting the support from the BC government, because right now I don't think Christy Clark would support this.
No, but she sure should. I know Christy, and she sure should.
She should.
Yeah.
So should the Prime Minister, but it's one step at a time. So what my philosophy was, and I said, I'm prepared to take this on alone, and that is to, in my own way, start the national dialogue in BC by supporting Stop the Violence BC, by getting them on the agenda at the UBCM convention, which I'm now successful at. I'm not even sure
what they know for doing that. Actually, it's been quite a little love fest for me, from Victoria to here. Yeah. So many of the mayors are supportive. There's the ones I met that are on there, but the other ones as well. And when I started doing this in 2006, it was a conversation most mayors did not want to have with me. They were very uncomfortable. But these days, it is a topic that is on the table and up for discussion. But not just that. Most mayors and most councils are on the right side of this at this time.
Here's the glitch I had. In fact, I just got a letter being done today. The mayor of Surrey, Diana Watts, started a deal. We've had one meeting. It was in Penticton, which is a mayor's congress.
Oh, yes.
Only mayors, no councillors, no regional directors or anything like that, just the mayors. Because as it was pointed out when we were there, and I never really stopped to think about it, mayors are the only directly elected political figures in Canada. Prime Minister isn't directly elected.
That's right.
I didn't go to the ballot box and vote for the Prime Minister or against him. I voted for a guy that was going to be told when to put his hand up by the person they chose to be
That's
their
right.
leader.
No, that's very
But with
true.
the mayor, it's a little different. Anyway, I guess they just wanted to make themselves feel good and exclusive.
For me, the mayors are important because you gentlemen are the, and ladies are the chair of the police boards in your towns.
Well, we're RCMP, so we don't have a police board per se.
So, but you do preside over something to do with the
Well,
policing.
technically, I'm the employer of the police as the mayor.
Right.
And the police, through contract, and we, in this city, we pay $22 million a year for RCMP.
I see.
And 90% of that is paid by the local taxpayer, so that's 20 million.
Yeah, so it affects your community directly, the policing, and what their priorities are and what they're doing, for sure.
And our relationship's good. In fact, in the news today, I have to learn this from the media, actually. Our police, our crime statistics improved by 14% year over
Lowest
year.
since 1972. I read that this morning too.
Oh, I haven't read the total depth.
In Canada, they're down. They're
Canada's down too.
Canada's down,
But of all communities, as a percentage, we're down year over year higher than any other one.
Oh, good for you.
And so then the obvious question
You take credit for that.
Well, I gave credit to the superintendent of the RCMP, so why is that, one has to say?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they've started some new strategies and really, and they should be doing this in healthcare too, by the way, becoming more proactive and reactive.
Right.
What's the point of going out and trying to solve a crime that's committed? Aren't we better to actually have a
Sir,
strategy
that's
to
why I'm here.
prevent the crime in the first place?
That's why
And
I'm here.
that is
You
kind
know,
of
the AGs had their say in there with their comment about it being airtight. The Vienna Declaration is the next letter that's in there. Which the United Nations went worldwide with conferences gathering in experts to find out if there was unexpected and unintended consequences of trying to prohibit drugs. And they found that they were vast and many. The disrespect for police, the increase in abuse, all of that stuff. The other letter that's next there is quotes from the 2002 Senate report. We knew all of this in 2002. Our senators looked into it. They discovered all of these dynamics of such things.
That's right, yeah.
They said that the prohibition is causing far more damage and cost to our society than the abuse of the substance ever could. And cannabis is the lead issue here. And it is the one that's most glaring. Yeah, there was 72% of all court cases in Canada in 2010 were drug related. That's a ridiculous statistic. Of those, the majority for cannabis, and of those, the majority for just simple possession. 50 to 80,000 people every year in Canada are given criminal records for simple possession of cannabis. So, because it goes back to 2002, in my opinion, and in the opinion of some other people who support me in what I'm doing, this is a crime that's being committed against our population somewhere within our federal government at the highest level. Yeah. So I'm taking this document to every police station, and I have already from Victoria to here, and I'm filing it as a criminal formal complaint that there is a criminal conspiracy that's happening at the highest level of our federal government. They are supporting the interests of lobbyists, and that's a crime. That they are in contempt of the populace, they are abusing their power, and every dollar that they spend on chasing people around for especially cannabis is a criminal misuse of public funds.
Well, I wouldn't disagree there, but let me ask you this question. How is there a conspiracy by, like who?
By somebody at the federal level.
Well, in other words, they're endorsing
the Prime Minister's office and the Justice Minister for since 2002 at least have maintained these policies and spent Canadian taxpayer dollars knowing full well what our senators had to say. And it's 10 years later, and now we've got a whole bunch of other experts weighing in and saying the same thing. Why is this the case? Mr. Harper's not just ignorant of science and not wanting to pay attention. There's something else going on. I don't believe in coincidences when people are making a lot of money on something. And the prohibition of cannabis doesn't make any sense, but it sure makes money for a group of people.
Let me, but that would be for organized crime.
Well, not just organized crime. It makes money for the Prime Minister. He can bring in all kinds of tax dollars and spend it. And, and who knows what the lobbyists... You see, there's several different gangs involved. And I hate to use the word gang when you're talking about police, but they're kind of one of them. There's the corporate gangs that want to have their interests protected and are spending large amounts of money on lobbying to have these laws maintained. There's the criminal organized gangs that are benefiting from having the stuff prohibited. And who knows where they fit into the rest, but they're certainly making a whole bunch of money, whether they have paid lobbyists or ways to exercise their leverage, I'm not sure, but they have a lot of interest involved and they have a lot of leverage to produce if they want to do so. And certainly the police organizations, the individual law enforcement people that I talk to, are just like the judge that you talk to. In their private conversations, they'll say, yeah, it's not how I wanted to be a policeman, it's not what we should be doing. But we're not here to make laws, we're just here to enforce laws.
That's right.
And by the way, I'm not going to say anything out loud for another 4 years yet because I still got to get to my pension. You know, I got a family to think about, right? That's what I was told by one officer who was so enthusiastic about what I was doing, but saying, me personally, I can't say anything yet because I got 4 years to go, you know, and I have to think about my family. Well, all these officers are thinking about their family and their mortgage payments and all the rest of it. And meanwhile, we're all paying out huge amounts of money that it's unsustainable. And the pensions is what's crippling so many countries, or cities rather, in North America, is all of these indexed pensions, where so many people are still on the payroll.
But that aside, it's all of the crime that is as a result of people desperate for the money to buy the drugs.
That's right too.
And
because the price of drugs is up through the roof because of prohibition, because all these guys have to make enough money to pay for a lawyer.
A drugstore, and I wouldn't say a liquor store because you don't want to necessarily introduce them to liquor if they're not on liquor, but
that's right.
Go in any licensed pharmacist, would be a behind-the-counter thing, but you wouldn't need a prescription. You just go in and you buy it. Yeah. The government makes its percentage. He makes his little percentage. It's controlled.
That's it.
You probably have to sign for it and show a driver's license so you know who's buying it.
The dangerous stuff.
And if a person thinks that's a violation of their what do you call it, privacy, then don't buy it.
That's right. That's right. There'll still be a black market, suppose, if there's enough for it. But you know,
here's one of the things that somebody was telling me that sort of agreed with you, but at the same time they said, however, there's some obstacles to overcome. And the biggest, and I had not thought of it, but it's been on my mind ever since. This meeting was maybe 4 months ago, and it's had quite an impact on me in terms of, holy geez, you know, like, boy, we Canadians sure know how to put our head under a rock. But anyway, it was, we can't do it alone unless the Americans do it at the same time.
I hear that all the time too.
And what I heard at that meeting, and they named the states, I'll have to get, one was definitely Washington State, the other was not California, that's in Washington. I think they were all three were in the West, but I'm not sure. Washington was one, neighbor to us.
Yeah.
They were prepared, like on a state basis, they were prepared to kind of go with the flow once everybody's ready to swim. Yeah. And then this would be maybe less than 2 months ago. I was talking to a local doctor here who's involved with this Stop the Violence thing. He takes on the medical perspective. And by the way, he sees no side effects. He said most of the things we do, including breathing, for God's sake, is more dangerous to health than cannabis.
It's all dose related. Everything is dose related.
It is, yeah, true. Yeah.
No good or bad drugs, just good and bad relationships with drugs, essentially. You know.
So I phoned this guy to tell him I was writing this letter, and which he was happy I was doing because I promised, and he was at the meeting. I promised I would. Wanted his address so I could send him a copy of it, and. He said, oh, by the way, at that meeting when it was released that there were 3 states that were coming on board, had not yet come on board, but were coming on board, very close or whatever. He said that's up to 13 now. And that's over a period of 90 days, from about February, March to, what are we now, July?
I do believe we've reached the tipping point. I do believe that the right experts are coming out and saying the right things, but you know, it's not a done deal yet. Because there's still some huge interests at play here that do not want to see this end.
Well, I was trying to sort of identify that in my mind, and I don't know who those interests would be.
Well, there's the pharmaceutical companies, because cannabis is serious medicine. Prior to 1900, there was over 100 papers written in medical journals.
But now would the pharmacy companies not actually distribute it?
Sure, but they want monopolies.
But that would be a new product line.
Yep,
but
and they're on it.
But there's no research involved.
But they can't get the monopoly on it because people will grow it themselves.
So what? There's all kinds of generic.
I still think that's why they're scared of prohibition. They are part of the group that's spending a lot of their money on lobbyists for this. So they are there.
Yeah,
but you know, there's another one too.
Do they like it to be illegal? They got no part of that market. If, you know, Hell's Angels or some...
Well, but they want to sell you antidepressants, and they want to sell you anti-inflammatories, and they want to sell you a whole bunch of things that cannabis is good for, and not have you use cannabis. It was one of the original forces behind Prohibition was the Rockefellers in their partnership with Bayer Pharmaceuticals back in 1910. Oh, really? They released statements from their scientists saying that herbs were kind of voodoo medicine, that you know, you couldn't really trust them, it was hard to get the proper dose, and now we were moving into the age of modern medicine where they had properly trained doctors in white lab coats with proper pills that were the proper dosage, and what happened was it was all about funding, because the medical institutions back in those days were all operating on funding from investors that wanted to benefit on their cures and things. And the funding all dried up for the schools for herbs, the schools for women, the schools for the medical, you know. And the Rockefellers benefited. Everybody put their money behind the Rockefellers and the new modern medicine, and away we went. So it's still in their interest. But, you know, an interesting part of this is alcohol. Alcohol was prohibited originally because the Rockefellers wanted to have a monopoly on fuel because of Henry Ford's invention. Fuel. They funded the temperance movement that went and got alcohol made illegal because of people beating up their wives and all the problems in society. But really it was the Rockefellers' agenda underneath that, because they wanted to have a monopoly on fuel. And Henry Ford thought people could he said, everyone in America can drive one of my cars on 1 acre of hemp. Because he was all about hemp ethanol fuel. He was all about hemp for building the bodies of cars and hemp for all kinds of different things.
I didn't know that. I've gone through his museum.
There's a picture in him in the 30s with a sledgehammer whacking the back of a car that he's made out of hemp plastic in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
And it leaves just a tiny mark. No dint, no nothing. It's stronger than steel. It's lighter than steel.
Really?
Hemp is amazing.
Yes,
it's the best clothing material on the
Yes, it
planet.
certainly
You can
is.
make obviously plastics, and
Yeah.
you can make compressed building materials that
Yeah.
are amazing. It's carbon neutral. It's an amazing product. So anyway, but that was alcohol prohibition. 13 years later, they were losing their control on the sale of alcohol for fuel, the Rockefellers were, because there was illegal stills all over the countrysides, and most of that alcohol was not being drunk by the people that were making it. It was being traded to their neighbors and used by themselves for their farm vehicles and their other vehicles. And so 13 years later, they decided to once again give the temperance movement $40,000 to go to Congress and lobby to have alcohol prohibition repealed and brought into the auspices of government distribution.
1920.
Well, no, 1920 is when they prohibited it.
Yeah. 1924 then, wasn't it?
No, 1933 is when they federally ended the prohibition of alcohol. It was 13 years.